The top 5 wrestlers at heavyweight, in no particular order, are Lucas Steveson of Northwestern, Greg Kerkvliet of Penn State, Anthony Cassioppi of Iowa, Mason Parris of Michigan, and Cohlton Schultz of Arizona State. So which of them is going to win a national title this year? Well, let's stop stalling and predict what's going to happen. Let's start by looking at Northwestern's Lucas Steveson. Yes, he is an All-American, but he has losses to Greg Kerkvliet, Anthony Cassioppi, and Mason Parris. So I'm going to kind of put him on the back burner right now, because the more pressing issue right now is this crazy circle of wins between these Big Ten foes. What am I talking about? Well, Greg Kerkvliet has never beat Anthony Cassioppi. Anthony Cassioppi has never beat Mason Parris. And Mason Parris, while he has beat Greg Kerkvliet, has 3 recent losses to the Nittany Lion. You see what I'm talking about now. The even crazier part is where these guys finished at nationals last year. Kirk finished in 4th, Parris in 5th, and Cassioppi in 7th. But I would still say that Parris has the more impressive career because he's the only one out of these guys who have ever made the national finals. But not so fast, because there is one impressive victory that Anthony Cassioppi has, or rather 2 impressive victories over Arizona State's Cohlton Schultz. Yes, you heard me right. He beat him in the 2021 National Championships twice. Once to go to the semis and once for the Consi's placing round. But the thing is, those wins may not actually matter, and I'll explain what I mean by that in just a little bit. First, we have to look at what's going to happen with these guys in the regular season so we can predict what happens at the Big Tens, so we can predict what happens at nationals. So in the regular season, Penn State, Iowa, and Michigan all wrestle each other in dual meets. That makes it easy for seeding for Big Tens, or at least that's what you think. Let's assume that Cassioppi loses to Parris in a duel and Parris loses to Kerkvliet in a duel. That just leaves Cassioppi and Kerkvliet. And the Penn State and Iowa duel meet is going to be a huge one on January 27th. If you saw my preview for that, you know that I think that Kerkvliet may actually win that match. But for the sake of argument and looking at past results, Kerkvliet hasn't overcome him yet, so let's just say that Cassioppi gets the win in the regular season. This would, of course, bring up another dilemma for seeding at the Big Tens, and assuming each of these guys has an undefeated season outside of those losses, this is how I think the seeding would go, just based on past Big Ten results, past Big Ten accolades. Cassioppi number 1, Kerkvliet number 2, and Parris number 3. That would set up a Parris versus Kerkvliet semifinal. And based on that, I'm just going to be honest with you, I don't see Mason Parris beating Greg Kerkvliet ever again. You can take my word for it right here. So Kerkvliet would go on to wrestle Cassioppi in the finals, and Iowa usually has a pretty good Big Ten tournament. Not saying that Penn State doesn't, but Cassioppi, I think, ends up getting the better of Kerkvliet yet again. So that leads us to the national championships. And I don't want to say that Cohlton Schultz has an easy route through the season, because I know he's going to have some tough matches, but he is wrestling in the Pac-12, where he doesn't have as much competition as much as the Big Ten, with all 3 of these top heavyweights in the same conference at the same weight. So I think the returning national finalist Cohlton Schultz does get that number 1 seed, but who gets number 2? Initially, I thought maybe Harvard's Yaroslav Slavikowski or Air Force's Wyatt Hendrickson could get that seed. Why? Well, I think that each of them could have undefeated regular seasons. They've done it in the past, and based on the conferences they're in, I think it could definitely happen again. The issue that I foresee with that not happening is neither of them have placed at nationals before, so we're probably going to see these Big Ten guys get seeded above them. And with that said, Cassioppi will get the number 2 seed, Kerkvliet number 3, and Parris number 4. Let's assume all these guys win up to the semis. That sets up a Parris versus Schultz semifinals, and I see Schultz beating Parris yet again. On the other side of the bracket, Cassioppi and Kerkvliet would meet up for the 3rd time this season at least. And I know every single one of those matches is going to be close, but there's one thing that Penn State brings to nationals that nobody else does. That's an incredible winning percentage. Look at comparing these 2 teams, Penn State and Iowa at nationals, and Penn State has constantly overperformed. Just since 2011, Penn State is 45 for 5 in the semifinals. And because of that, because of how tight this match already is, and because of Kerkvliet riding the momentum of likely seeing RBY, Max Dean, Aaron Brooks, and Carter Shirachi making the finals, I think Greg Kerkvliet may finally pull it off, beat Cassioppi, and head into the finals for a match against Cohlton Schultz. And at this point, I want to hear from you. Who wins, Greg Kerkvliet or Cohlton Schultz? I know we have a lot of Penn State Fanco fanatics, but I think that Cohlton Schultz is a little bit underrated. He is a big guy, and he has had incredible accolades throughout his career so far. His only loss last season was to the legend Gable Steveson, and the season before that, his only losses were to Iowa's Anthony Cassioppi. Oh yeah, remember how he said that Cassioppi's wins over Schultz may not matter? Well, they don't matter in this instance because of where the seeds are, where these guys ended up in the brackets. Could Cassioppi beat Schultz? Maybe, but he may not even get the chance to wrestle him. So let's reel it back in and look at the national finals between Schultz versus Kerkvliet. I actually think that Schultz wins this match because of 3 reasons. The first is, just a pure size difference. I think Cohlton Schultz is a man of a man. And not that Kerkvliet isn't, but it's a big difference. Reason number 2 is that Schultz has made the national finals before. He's been there. He's tasted that almost victory. He wanted to win that title, but couldn't get it done. And because of that, I think that this is the season that he could get the job done. And the third reason is simply that Cohlton Schultz has a win over Greg Kerkvliet from before. He beat him in the 2021 season almost by a major. It was a 14-8 decision in the national championship. So without Gable Steveson in the fold, I do think that Cohlton Schultz ends up winning the title this year. To find out my predictions for every other weight and everything you need to know about this upcoming season, you can check out this playlist with previews from 125 all the way up through heavyweight. This is something you're not going to want to miss.